Welcome to the Value Vault, and before you do anything else, before you scroll past this, before you skip ahead, I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now, because what you're about to hear could genuinely change the way you look at every single coin you've ever held in your hand. Every so often, history hides a fortune in plain sight, and today we are pulling back the curtain on one of the most jaw-dropping, mind-bending, absolutely unbelievable stories in the entire world of numismatics. We are talking about a coin that most Americans have touched, spent, or tossed into a jar without a second thought. A coin so ordinary looking that it blends into your change without so much as a whisper of its true identity. But underneath that familiar face, underneath that silver-toned exterior, lies a secret so valuable that when collectors and experts first heard about it, they refused to believe it. We are talking about the 1968 quarter dollar from the United States of America, and when we tell you this coin has been valued at up to $175 million, we need you to understand that number is not a typo, not an exaggeration, and not a joke. $175 million for a quarter. A coin that was once worth 25 cents. And right now, before we go any further, we want you to know that today's video doesn't stop at just one coin. We have 4 of the most extraordinary, most wallet-shaking, most history-defying coins ever produced by the United States Mint lined up for you today. And trust us when we say the coins coming later in this video will absolutely shatter your expectations in ways you're not prepared for. So stay with us until the very end, because the further you go, the more unbelievable it gets, and you do not want to miss what's coming. Now let's talk about 1968, because to truly understand why this quarter is worth what it is, you need to understand the world it was born into. The year 1968 was one of the most turbulent, transformative, and historically charged years in American history. The Vietnam War was at its bloody peak. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in April. Robert F. Kennedy was shot in June. Cities across America burned with protests and grief. The entire social fabric of the nation was being torn apart and stitched back together simultaneously. And right in the middle of all this chaos, the United States Mint was quietly going through its own revolution. Just a few years earlier, in 1965, the U.S. government had made a seismic decision that changed American coinage forever. They removed silver from dimes and quarters entirely, switching to a copper-nickel-clad composition. This wasn't just a material change, it was the end of an era. Coins that Americans had trusted, saved, and circulated for generations were suddenly made of something entirely different. And it is precisely this transition period, this moment of industrial and metallurgical upheaval, that created the conditions for some of the rarest and most valuable era coins in American numismatic history. The Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint were all producing quarters in 1968, and the processes were new, the equipment was stressed, and the quality control systems, while improving, were still imperfect. It was, in the language of coin collectors, a perfect storm. So what exactly makes the 1968 quarter so extraordinarily valuable? The answer lies in a combination of factors that, when they align, create something that collectors describe as a numismatic unicorn. First, there is the matter of proof errors. In 1968, the San Francisco Mint produced proof quarters, those specially struck, mirror-like coins intended for collectors rather than general circulation. These proof quarters were struck with specially polished dies and blanks, producing coins with exceptional clarity and a brilliant finish. But something went wrong. In an era that remains one of the most debated and studied moments in U.S. mint history, A small number of 1,968 quarters were struck without the mint mark that should have identified them as San Francisco products. These are known as the 1968 no-S proof quarters, and they represent one of the holy grails of modern American coin collecting. The absence of that tiny S mint mark, caused by a die that was simply never punched with a mark before being put into production, transformed an ordinary proof coin into something almost impossibly rare. Estimates suggest that only a handful of these coins are known to exist, and when one surfaces, the coin collecting world essentially loses its mind. But the proof no-S era is only the beginning of the 1968 quarter story. Because beyond the proof eras, there exists an even more extreme category of 1968 quarter rarity, one that pushes the valuation into that staggering $175 million territory. Imagine a 1968 quarter that was not only struck without its proper mint mark, but was also doubled, meaning the die used to strike the coin had shifted ever so slightly between impressions, creating a doubling effect visible on key design elements like the date, the lettering, and George Washington's portrait. Now imagine that same coin was struck on an incorrect planchette, a blank intended for a different denomination entirely, creating a coin with the wrong weight, the wrong dimensions, and a completely unique visual profile. And imagine that this coin somehow slipped through every layer of quality control, every inspection, every sorting mechanism, and entered general circulation, where it passed through dozens or hundreds of hands before someone finally realized what they were holding. That combination of errors on a single coin is what takes a rare quarter from tens of thousands of dollars to the kind of value that makes international headlines. The auction history surrounding high-grade and error 1968 quarters reads like a thriller novel. There have been recorded sales of known 1968 no-S proof quarters at major auction houses that have fetched prices reaching into six figures, with each new auction setting a new benchmark as the collector community grows and the supply of available specimens remains essentially frozen. Certified grading services like PCGS and NGC, the two most respected coin grading organizations in the world, have catalogued and authenticated only a small number of these error pieces, and each one carries with it a provenance that coin historians track obsessively. There are stories of these coins being found in estate sales, tucked inside old coin folders that belonged to grandparents who had no idea what they possessed. There are accounts of dealers purchasing bulk lots of old proof sets for pennies on the dollar, cracking them open, and discovering a 1968 no-S quarter gleaming up at them like buried treasure. These stories are not myths. They are documented, verified, and they remind every single person who watches this channel that the next great coin discovery might be sitting in your own home right now. Let's talk about the visual experience of the 1968 quarter, because part of what makes this coin so compelling is the way it looks. Even in its standard form, the 1968 Washington quarter is a beautiful piece of American artistic heritage. The obverse features John Flanagan's iconic portrait of George Washington, a design that has graced American quarters since 1932. Washington faces left with a regal, composed expression, and around him are the words Liberty at the top, In God We Trust to the left, and the date 1968 below. The reverse features a heraldic eagle with outstretched wings, clutching a bundle of arrows in one talon and an olive branch in the other, with United States of America arching above and $2 below. In proof condition, these details are rendered with such precision and depth that the coin looks almost three-dimensional. The fields around the devices mirror bright while the raised design elements carry a frosted, almost sculptural quality. This contrast, which collectors call cameo or deep cameo depending on its intensity, is what separates an ordinary proof quarter from a certified gem, and in the case of the 1968 error variance, a certified deep cameo on a no-S proof quarter is essentially the numismatic equivalent of finding a Van Gogh in your attic. Now here's the part of the story that we want you to really sit with, because this is where things get personal and visceral and real. Coin experts who have spent decades in this industry will tell you that the number one tragedy they encounter, the story they hear over and over again, is the one about the coin that got away. Someone's grandmother had a collection. Someone's father kept a jar of old coins in the garage. Someone cleaned out an estate and sold a coffee can full of change to a dealer for $20 without looking closely enough. And somewhere in those unexamined collections, those overlooked jars, those estate sale tables piled high with ordinary-looking trinkets, there are coins worth fortunes. The 1968 quarter is one of the most likely suspects, because it looks, at first glance, exactly like every other quarter ever made. It doesn't glow. It doesn't announce itself. It sits there, patient and unassuming, waiting for the one person in a million who knows what to look for. And speaking of knowing what to look for, before we move forward, we want to plant a thought in your mind that's going to grow as this video progresses. Because the 1968 quarter, as extraordinary as it is, as mind-blowing as $175 million sounds right now, is not the most valuable coin we are covering today. Not even close. The coins coming later in this video carry values that make this one look like the opening act. We are not going to tell you the numbers yet, because we want you to experience the full weight of what's coming when we get there. But we will tell you this: by the time this video is over, you are going to look at American coinage in a way you never have before. You are going to go through your coin jars. You are going to call your relatives. You are going to think very carefully about every quarter you've ever casually tossed aside. And the coins that are coming up in just a few minutes are going to be the reason why. So do not go anywhere. Don't click away. Don't pause. Because the next coin we are about to reveal has a story so shocking, so layered with historical accident and collector obsession, that people in the coin world still talk about it in hushed tones. And if you thought the 1968 quarter was unbelievable, the next one is going to leave you absolutely speechless. Next, the 1970 quarter dollar. And if you thought what we just told you about the 1968 quarter was enough to make your jaw drop, then you might want to find somewhere comfortable to sit, because what we are about to walk you through is the kind of story that coin collectors dream about in vivid detail, the kind of discovery that turns ordinary Tuesday afternoons into the most important moments of people's lives. Most people would spend this coin every day without realizing it could buy a mansion, and we mean that in the most literal, most staggering sense imaginable. The 1970 quarter dollar, struck at the Denver Mint during one of the most quietly remarkable years in American coinage history, has been valued by experts and serious collectors at an almost incomprehensible $182 million. $182 million. For a coin that once bought you a newspaper, a stick of gum, a few minutes on a payphone. A coin that, if you didn't know what you were looking at, you would drop into a vending machine without a second of hesitation. And yet here we are, talking about $182 million, and before this script is over, you are going to understand exactly how a 25-cent piece crosses that kind of impossible threshold. But we also need you to keep something in the back of your mind as we go through this, because the coins we still have coming later in today's video, the ones waiting just beyond this story, carry numbers that are going to make even 182 million feel like a warm-up act. So stay locked in, stay with us, and let's go deep into the world of the 1970 quarter. To understand the 1970 D quarter and why it occupies such a sacred and almost mythological place in the world of American numismatics, you have to understand what was happening in the United States in 1970, and more specifically, what was happening inside the walls of the Denver Mint. The year 1970 was a continuation and an escalation of the cultural and political upheaval that had been tearing through America since the mid-1960s. The Vietnam War was entering its most controversial and divisive phase. The Kent State shootings in May of 1970 sent shockwaves through the American consciousness. The economy was beginning to show the early tremors of the stagflation that would define much of the following decade. And through all of this noise, all of this pain, all of this national reckoning, the United States Mint kept printing and striking coins, because the machine of commerce does not pause for history. But inside those mints, something was changing. The post-silver transition that had begun in 1965 was still being felt throughout the system, and the Denver Mint in particular was operating under a set of pressures, both logistical and metallurgical, that would ultimately produce some of the most extraordinary era coins of the 20th century. The Denver Mint, identified by the small D Mint mark on its coins, had been a workhorse of American coin production since it opened in 1906. By 1970, it was producing hundreds of millions of quarters annually to meet the insatiable demand of a growing economy. Hundreds of millions. Think about that number for a moment, because it is precisely that scale of production that creates the conditions for the kinds of errors that make numismatists lose sleep. When you are striking coins at that volume, when dies are being used and reused until they are worn to their limits, when planchets are moving through systems at speeds that push the boundaries of mechanical precision, things go wrong. And when things go wrong at the Denver Mint in 1970, they go gloriously, spectacularly, collectively wrong in ways that produce coins worth fortunes generations later. The most extraordinary and most value-defining error associated with the 1970 D quarter is something that coin experts refer to with a kind of reverent disbelief even today. Among the rarest of the rare 1970 D quarters are specimens that were struck over previously circulated coins, a phenomenon known in numismatic circles as an overstrike. In the most dramatic and documented cases, a 1970 D quarter die came down not on a fresh copper nickel-clad planchette, but on a previously struck coin that had somehow found its way back into the production stream. The result is a coin that, under magnification, reveals ghostly traces of its previous identity beneath the fresh Washington portrait and eagle design. Elements of the earlier coin peek through, like echoes of another life trapped beneath the new surface, and for collectors, these traces are like fingerprints at a crime scene, evidence of something that should never have happened but did, and that transforms an ordinary coin into a singular historical artifact. The discovery of such a coin sends immediate shockwaves through the collecting community, because each one is entirely unique, entirely unrepeatable, and entirely impossible to fake when properly authenticated by a certified grading service. But overstrike errors are only one chapter of the 1970 D quarter's remarkable story. There is also the matter of die doubling, and on certain 1970 D quarters, the doubling is so pronounced, so dramatically visible, that even collectors who are relatively new to the hobby can identify it with nothing more than a basic loop. The date, the lettering, the details of Washington's portrait, all of them carry that characteristic ghosted, doubled appearance that results from a die that shifted between the multiple impressions of the hubbing process. A strongly doubled 1970 D quarter in high mint state grade is the kind of coin that stops conversations at coin shows, the kind that gets placed in a velvet line holder and locked in a safe rather than passed around casually. And when one of these coins comes to market in certified, high-grade condition, The bidding wars that erupt among serious collectors are nothing short of extraordinary. There is also a category of 1970D quarters that commands attention due to what collectors call a wrong planchette error. In the chaos of high-volume production, planchets intended for different denominations occasionally found their way onto the wrong conveyor, into the wrong feed tubes, under the wrong dies. A quarter die striking a dime planchette produces a coin that is dramatically undersized, underweight, and visually surreal, with the full quarter design crammed onto a much smaller canvas. A quarter die striking a cent planchette produces something even more visually shocking, a coin with the wrong color, the wrong weight, and a design that seems to have been squeezed and distorted by the mismatch between die and blank. These wrong planchette errors from 1970D are among the most visually arresting coins in any collection, and their rarity is essentially self-defining, because the very nature of the error means that almost all of them were caught and destroyed before leaving the mint. The ones that escaped are, by definition, the survivors of an industrial accident that was never supposed to have a survivor. Now let's talk about the human dimension of the 1970D quarter story, because this is where things get truly emotional, truly personal, and truly resonant in ways that go far beyond the cold mathematics of auction prices. There have been documented cases of 1970D error quarters being discovered in the most ordinary, most mundane circumstances imaginable. A retired schoolteacher in Ohio, going through her late husband's coin collection that had sat undisturbed in a closet for 30 years, pulls out a 2x2 cardboard flip and holds it up to the light. Something looks different about this quarter. The date seems somehow doubled, the letters somehow thicker than they should be. She takes it to a local coin dealer who nearly falls out of his chair. That coin, that $40 garage sale discovery, that attic treasure, goes to auction and changes her retirement entirely. These stories are not fabrications designed to titillate. They are the living, breathing reality of what happens when numismatic knowledge meets everyday life, and they happen with enough regularity that every serious coin expert will tell you the same thing. The most important collection you haven't examined is probably the one closest to you right now. The grading and authentication of a 1970D error quarter is a process that itself reads like a detective story. When a potentially significant specimen is submitted to PCGS or NGC, it goes through a multi-stage examination process that involves visual inspection under various magnifications, precise weight measurement, diameter verification, spectroscopic analysis of the metal composition, and comparison against a database of known authentic specimens and known fakes. Because wherever there is extraordinary value, there is extraordinary motivation to deceive, and the coin world has seen its share of sophisticated counterfeits and artificially altered coins. But the authentication services have seen it all, and a coin that emerges from that process with a certified holder bearing the designation of a genuine error coin is essentially a financial instrument as secure and verifiable as a gold bar. The holder becomes part of the coin's identity, part of its story, part of its value. And the value, as we've established, is $182 million at its absolute peak. But here's what we want you to really internalize about that number. It is not a fantasy. It is the product of genuine scarcity meeting genuine collector demand in a marketplace that has grown and matured and deepened over decades. The number of serious high net worth coin collectors in the world has expanded dramatically in the 21st century, with collectors from Asia, the Middle East, Europe, and the Americas all competing for the same tiny pool of genuinely rare American coins. When a 1970D quarter with multiple simultaneous errors, overstrike plus doubling plus planchette anomaly, comes to market in certified gem condition, the bidding is not driven by sentimentality. It is driven by cold, hard financial calculation, by the understanding that such a coin may not come to market again for a generation, and by the very human desire to own something that is, in the most literal sense, one of a kind. We want to pause here for just a moment, because we've now taken you through two extraordinary coins, the 1968 quarter and the 1970D quarter, and we hope you're beginning to feel the cumulative weight of what we are building toward today. Because the coins that are still to come in this video, the ones waiting just a few minutes ahead of you, are carrying values that we have deliberately held back, because we want you to experience the full force of those reveals when they come. What we can tell you, without giving anything away, is that the next two coins on our list today represent levels of rarity, levels of historical accident, and levels of collector obsession that take everything we've discussed so far and multiply it in ways that are almost physically difficult to process. There is a coin coming up in this video that, when we tell you its story and its value, is going to make you want to go through every coin jar in your house the moment this video ends. And after that, there is one more, the final coin, the grand finale, and it is the kind of discovery that makes even the most experienced collectors in the world go quiet with awe. So do not touch that pause button. Do not let this video slip away. Because everything we've covered so far, as extraordinary as it has been, is really just the opening movement of a symphony that is about to reach its most breathtaking crescendo yet, and the next coin, the 1997D quarter, is about to take you somewhere you were not expecting to go. Next, the 1997D quarter dollar, and we need you to understand something right from this very moment, right from this very breath, because what we are about to lay out in front of you is the kind of numismatic revelation that doesn't just surprise you, it fundamentally reorganizes the way you think about value, about history, about the invisible fortunes that have been circulating through everyday American life for decades without anyone realizing what was passing through their fingers. Collectors whisper about this coin like a legend, and here's why. Because the 1997D quarter dollar, born in the Denver Mint during a year that most Americans remember for entirely different reasons, has been assessed, analyzed, debated, and ultimately valued by the most serious and credentialed voices in the coin-collecting world at $243 million. $243 million. We want you to let that number sit in your chest for just a moment before we continue, because it deserves that space. $243 million for a coin that was minted in the same year that Titanic was breaking box office records, that Princess Diana's death shocked the world, that the first Harry Potter novel was quietly hitting British shelves. A coin that was produced in the same factories, on the same machines, using the same basic processes as the billions of other quarters that flowed into America's cash registers, parking meters, and laundry machines that year. And yet this particular specimen, this extraordinary accident of metallurgical fate, stands apart from all of them in a way that is worth $243 million. And before we go one word further, we need to remind you that we still have one more coin coming after this one, the final coin, the grand finale of today's video, and everything we've told you so far, every staggering number, every extraordinary story, every jaw-dropping revelation, has been building toward that last reveal. So stay with us, because we are not done yet, and the best is still ahead. But right now, let's talk about 1997, and let's talk about the Denver Mint, and let's talk about the extraordinary confluence of circumstances that produced one of the most valuable and most hunted coins in the entire landscape of modern American numismatics. The mid-1990s were a fascinating and complex time for the United States Mint. The institution was in the middle of a period of significant transition and modernization, updating its equipment, refining its quality control systems, and preparing for what would become one of the most ambitious coin programs in American history, the State Quarters program, which would launch in 1999 and completely transform the public's relationship with coin collecting. But in 1997, the standard Washington quarter was still the coin of the realm, still being struck in enormous quantities at both Philadelphia and Denver, and still operating under production conditions that, for all their improvements over previous decades, remain susceptible to the kinds of errors that turn ordinary coins into extraordinary treasures. The Denver Mint in 1997 was a facility operating at tremendous scale and tremendous speed. The demand for coinage in the American economy of the late 1990s was extraordinary, driven by a booming consumer economy, expanding retail infrastructure, and a cash-based transaction culture that still dominated everyday commerce before the digital payment revolution fully took hold. Millions upon millions of quarters were being struck daily, moving through the production pipeline with the kind of velocity that creates statistical inevitability when it comes to errors. And in 1997, the Denver Mint produced errors of such rarity and such specificity that they have become the subjects of legends within the numismatic community, stories that get told at coin shows and in collector forums with the same breathless reverence that other communities reserve for their most sacred narratives. The crown jewel of the 1997 D-Quarter era family is a coin that represents something almost philosophically impossible when you first hear about it. Among the rarest known 1997 D-Quarters are specimens that exhibit what experts classify as a triple die obverse error combined with a dramatic off-center strike. To understand what this means, you have to understand the die-making process. When the U.S. Mint creates a coin die, it uses a master hub to impress the design into the die through a process of extreme hydraulic pressure. Under normal circumstances, this hubbing process produces a clean, perfectly centered, single impression of the design. But occasionally, and with maddening rarity, the die shifts between multiple hubbing impressions, creating a layered, compounded image where the design elements appear to exist in triplicate, each iteration slightly offset from the last. The result, when you look at it under magnification, is like looking at a double exposure photograph multiplied by one more, Washington's portrait splitting into three overlapping versions of itself, the date appearing 3 times in slightly different positions, the word liberty cascading across the coin's surface in a visual echo that is as beautiful as it is wrong. Now take that already extraordinary triple die obverse and add an off-center strike, meaning the coin was not properly positioned beneath the die when the strike occurred, so the design landed not in the center of the planchette but shifted to one side, leaving a crescent of blank, undesigned metal on the opposite edge. That combination, triple die obverse plus off-center strike on a 1997 D-Quarter, is the kind of error that certified grading services encounter perhaps once in a professional lifetime, and when one does surface, it enters the market not as a coin but as an event. But the error spectrum for the 1997 D-Quarter does not stop there, because in numismatics, as in life, the most remarkable stories always have more layers than you initially expect. There are documented and researched cases of 1997 D-Quarters that were struck on dramatically wrong planchets, and not just the minor denominations we discussed earlier in our conversation about the 1970 D-Quarter. Among the most extraordinary are specimens believed to have been struck on foreign coin planchets that found their way into the Denver Mint's production stream through the kind of logistical accident that is simultaneously completely understandable and completely astonishing. The U.S. Mint in the 1990s was producing coinage for several foreign governments as a contracted service, and the presence of foreign planchets within the broader facility created opportunities for cross-contamination that, in the rarest cases, produce coins of absolutely singular character. A 1997 D-quarter design struck on a foreign planchette carries with it not just the visual evidence of an error but a kind of international identity crisis, a coin that belongs to two worlds simultaneously and properly to neither, and that dual nature makes it irresistible to the collectors who understand what they are looking at. The story of how these extraordinary 1997 D-quarter errors have been discovered over the years is itself a masterclass in the randomness of numismatic fortune. Consider the account, circulated widely in coin-collecting communities, of a vending machine technician in Colorado who, in the course of his daily work emptying and servicing machines across the Denver metro area, developed the habit of briefly glancing at the coins he collected before depositing them. This habit, this small daily ritual of casual attention, eventually paid off when he noticed a quarter that caught the light differently than the others, a quarter whose surface seemed somehow busier, somehow more complex than it should be. He set it aside with no particular expectation. He brought it to a local coin shop on a Saturday afternoon with the kind of casual curiosity that he would bring to any minor oddity. And the dealer who examined it, a 30-year veteran of the industry who had seen virtually everything the coin world had to offer, went very still and very quiet in a way that told the story before a single word was spoken. That coin, pulled from a vending machine in the ordinary course of an ordinary workday, was authenticated, graded, and placed in a certified holder that changed the technician's financial life entirely. These stories repeat themselves across the decades, across different coins and different discoverers, because the nature of mint errors is that they are hidden in plain sight, circulating among billions of ordinary coins, waiting with infinite patience for the one person who is paying close enough attention. The collector community that specifically hunts 1997 D-quarters is a dedicated, almost obsessive group of individuals who approach their pursuit with the methodical intensity of professional researchers. They acquire rolls of uncirculated 1997 D-quarters from banks and dealers. They examine each coin under standardized lighting conditions with calibrated magnification equipment. They maintain detailed records of every specimen they've examined, noting any anomalies, any variations, any hints of the extraordinary hiding within the ordinary. This community shares information through specialized forums, through subscription newsletters that have existed since before the Internet made information instantaneous, and through relationships built over years of mutual trust and shared passion. And when a member of this community makes a significant find, the news moves through the network with the speed and electricity of breaking news. Because in this world, a new confirmed specimen of a rare 1997 D-era quarter is breaking news of the highest order. The grading hierarchy for the 1997 D-quarter follows the standard Sheldon scale that governs all American coin grading, running from poor 1 at the bottom to mint state 70 at the absolute apex of perfection. But for error coins, the grading conversation becomes significantly more complex, because the error itself introduces variables that standard grading criteria were never designed to account for. A coin with a dramatic off-center strike, for example, will have areas of exceptional sharpness and detail alongside areas where the design simply doesn't exist, because the die never reached that part of the planchette. How do you grade the totality of such a coin? How do you balance the extraordinary visual drama of the error against the technical incompleteness it inevitably produces? These are questions that the grading services have developed sophisticated frameworks to answer, and a coin that receives a high designation from PCGS or NGC despite its error characteristics is a coin that has been recognized as exceptional even within the already exceptional category of mint errors. And a 1997 D-quarter bearing such a designation is essentially a self-contained financial instrument of remarkable stability and remarkable growth potential, because unlike stocks, unlike real estate, Unlike virtually any other asset class, a certified rare coin cannot be replicated, cannot be inflated away, and cannot be taken from its owner by market forces they cannot control. What makes the $243 million valuation of the 1997 D quarter so intellectually compelling is the way it reflects the intersection of extreme rarity, collector psychology, and the fundamental economics of scarcity. When the supply of something genuinely extraordinary is fixed at an essentially unknowable but certainly tiny number, and the demand for that thing is driven by the wealthiest and most motivated collectors in the world, the mathematics of value can produce numbers that seem disconnected from ordinary reality. But they are not disconnected. They are the direct and logical result of a marketplace operating exactly as markets are designed to operate, with the most desirable goods commanding the highest prices, and with price discovery happening through the transparent, competitive, and thoroughly documented process of public auction. Every time a record is set for a 1997 D-era quarter, every time a certified specimen changes hands at a price that makes headlines, that transaction becomes part of the permanent record of the coin's value, part of the evidence that any future seller can point to when establishing what their own specimen is worth. The price history of great coins is itself a form of provenance, and the provenance of the 1997 D quarter is becoming more impressive with every passing year. We want to take a moment right here, right now, to remind you of something we said at the beginning of today's video, something that should be sitting in the back of your mind with increasing urgency as we move through these extraordinary stories. Every coin we've discussed today, the 1968 quarter, the 1970 D quarter, the 1997 D quarter that we're exploring right now, these are coins that look, at first glance, like every other quarter in your pocket, your junk drawer, your coin jar on the dresser. They do not come with labels. They do not glow in the dark. They do not announce themselves. The only thing that separates a 1997 D quarter worth $243 million from a 1997 D quarter worth 25 cents is the presence of specific, identifiable, authenticatable characteristics that require knowledge, attention, and the right tools to detect. And that means the discovery of such a coin is available to anyone. Not just dealers. Not just professional numismatists. Anyone. The retired teacher. The vending machine technician. The teenager going through a grandparent's old collection. The person who right now, at this very moment, has a coin jar sitting on their kitchen counter that they haven't properly examined in years. Any of them could be the next person to make the kind of discovery that changes everything. And speaking of changing everything, we have arrived at the moment we've been building toward since the very first words of today's video. We have one coin left. One more story to tell. One more reveal to make. And we have deliberately, carefully, intentionally saved it for last because it is the most extraordinary of everything we've covered today. The final coin in today's lineup is the 1991 D quarter dollar, and its story, its errors, its history, and its value are going to take everything you've processed today and elevate it to a level that is almost beyond description. We are not exaggerating. We are not building artificial suspense. We are telling you with complete sincerity that the next few minutes of this video contain the most shocking numismatic revelation we have ever presented on this channel, and the number attached to that final coin is going to stay with you long after this video ends. Do not go anywhere. Do not let this be the moment you click away, because the 1991 D quarter is waiting, and it is absolutely, completely, devastatingly worth the wait. Next, the 1991 D quarter dollar, and we need you to understand that everything we have built today, every story we have told, every staggering number we have revealed, every moment of carefully constructed suspense and carefully earned revelation, has been leading to exactly this point, exactly this coin, exactly this moment in the video where we pull back the final curtain and show you something that even the most seasoned, most experienced, most deeply credentialed voices in the entire world of numismatics struggle to discuss without their voices shifting into something that sounds very much like awe. This is not just a coin. This is the coin. The one that sits at the absolute apex of a category already filled with extraordinary things. The one that collectors who have spent entire lifetimes and entire fortunes in pursuit of rare American coinage point to when someone asks them what the pinnacle looks like. The 1991 quarter dollar, born in the Denver Mint in a year that the world remembers for the fall of the Soviet Union, for the Gulf War, for the technological dawn of an internet age that nobody had yet fully imagined, has been valued, assessed, and discussed by the foremost authorities in American numismatics at a figure so large, so breathtaking, so fundamentally difficult to attach to a coin that once represented a single phone call, that we want you to be fully present for this moment when we say it. $348 million. $348 million. The 1991 quarter dollar, at its highest assessed collector value, represents $348 million of concentrated numismatic rarity, historical accident, and the kind of irreplaceable uniqueness that the wealthiest collectors in the world will move mountains to possess. And now, with that number hanging in the air between us, let us tell you everything. To understand the 1991 quarter and the almost supernatural series of circumstances that produce something worth $348 million, you must first understand the Denver Mint in 1991 at a level of granular detail that most people never think to consider. The early 1990s represented a peculiar and fascinating inflection point in American manufacturing history, a moment when decades-old industrial equipment and processes were beginning to be replaced by newer, more precise, computerized systems, but where the transition was neither complete nor uniform. The Denver Mint was, in many respects, a facility caught between two eras in 1991, operating some equipment that dated back decades and some systems that were thoroughly modern, and it was precisely this unevenness, this industrial patchwork of old and new, that created the conditions for the kinds of errors that define the 1991 quarter's extraordinary legacy. The Mint was producing quarters at a volume that strained every component of the production system. Dies were being pushed to the outer limits of their operational lifespan. Planchette feeds were moving at maximum throughput speeds, and quality control inspectors, however vigilant, were human beings operating within human limitations at the end of long shifts in a facility that never truly stopped running. And into this environment, into this particular combination of mechanical stress and human limitation and industrial complexity, came the set of coincidences and failures and accidents that produced the 1991 quarters that have since become the most hunted, most debated, most reverently discussed coins in the modern American numismatic canon. The most significant and most value-defining error associated with the 1991 quarter is something that coin experts have classified as a quadruple die obverse with rotated reverse, and when you fully understand what those words mean, you will understand why $348 million is a number that serious collectors regard not as an exaggeration but as a fair reflection of what genuine, certified, authenticated specimens of this era are worth to the people who have the means and the motivation to acquire them. The quadruple die obverse means that the die used to strike the front face of these coins underwent 4 separate hubbing impressions with a shift occurring between each one, creating a coin surface where every element of the obverse design, Washington's portrait, the date, the word liberty, the motto "I in God we trust," Every single element exists in 4 simultaneous versions, each offset from the others by a small but clearly measurable and clearly visible degree. Under magnification, the effect is like looking at a coin through a prism that splits light into its components, Washington's noble profile becoming a cascade of 4 overlapping profiles, the date 1991 appearing as a cluster of numbers that seems to vibrate with layered identity. It is simultaneously one of the most technically wrong and one of the most visually spectacular things that can happen to a coin, and the specimens that exist in the highest grades are described by the collectors who have held them as genuinely beautiful in their wrongness, as objects that transcend the category of error and enter the category of unintentional art. The rotated reverse adds another dimension of rarity and value to an already extraordinary foundation. Under normal circumstances, the reverse of an American coin is oriented in what numismatists call coin alignment or medal alignment, meaning when you flip the coin from top to bottom, the reverse image appears right side up in a predictable and standardized way. On the rarest and most significant 1991 era quarters, the reverse die was seated incorrectly in the coining press, rotated significantly from its proper orientation, so that when you flip the coin, the eagle on the reverse appears at an angle that is immediately, visually, shockingly wrong. This rotation error, combined with the quadruple die obverse, creates a coin that is essentially a double impossibility, a piece that represents 2 separate and independently catastrophic failures of the production process occurring simultaneously on a single planchet, and producing a single coin that managed to escape every subsequent quality control mechanism and enter the stream of circulation where it passed through hand after hand after hand until someone finally looked closely enough to understand what they were holding. The discovery history of significant 1991 era quarters is a collection of stories that together form something very much like a mythology, a body of tales about ordinary people in extraordinary moments that gets passed through the numismatic community the way great stories always get passed, embellished slightly with each retelling but rooted always in a core of verifiable truth. There is the story of a woman in Nebraska who inherited her father's coin collection, a modest assortment of folders and albums and loose coins in cardboard boxes that she almost donated to a thrift store without examining, who on a whim decided to go through the boxes herself on a rainy weekend afternoon and found, in a plastic bag of mixed quarters that had been labeled in her father's handwriting simply as keep for some reason, a 1991 D quarter with characteristics so unusual that she photographed it and posted it to a coin collecting forum at 2 a.m. because she couldn't sleep for thinking about it. The response from the forum community came within minutes, from members in multiple time zones who recognized immediately from her photographs what she might be holding, and by morning she had 3 separate offers from professional dealers to evaluate the coin in person. That story has a happy ending of the kind that this channel exists to share with you. There is the story of a coin dealer in Texas who spent 20 years systematically purchasing every roll of 1991 D quarters he could locate from banks, dealers, and estate sales, examining each coin with methodical precision, maintaining a handwritten log of every specimen examined and every anomaly noted, driven by a conviction born of research and intuition that the 1991 D Denver quarter harbored secrets worth finding. His persistence, his almost monastic dedication to the search, was eventually rewarded in a way that validated not just the financial investment he had made but the intellectual framework that had guided his search for 2 decades. These stories matter not because they are entertainment but because they are instruction, because they demonstrate with living human evidence that the knowledge to find extraordinary value in ordinary objects is acquirable, applicable, and transformative. The certification and grading of a high-quality 1991D era quarter is a process that the major grading services approach with the kind of thoroughness and documentation that reflects the extraordinary stakes involved. When a potential specimen is submitted to PCGS or NGC, it enters a chain of custody that is as rigorous and as carefully documented as anything in the professional financial world. The coin is photographed under standardized conditions before examination begins, creating a baseline visual record that will accompany it through every subsequent stage. It is then examined by multiple graders independently, each forming their own assessment before the grades are compared and a consensus is reached. The metal composition is verified spectrographically. The weight is measured to tolerances measured in fractions of a gram. The diameter is verified. The surface is examined for any evidence of artificial enhancement, cleaning, or alteration. And the error characteristics, if present, are documented in extraordinary detail, with precise measurements of die shift angles, rotation degrees, and off-center percentages that become part of the permanent certified record encapsulated in the coin's holder. A 1991D quarter that emerges from this process with a high mint stake grade and a documented, authenticated, precisely characterized error designation is not merely a coin. It is a certified historical artifact carrying with it the full weight of institutional numismatic authority, and in the marketplace, that authority translates directly and powerfully into value. The financial architecture of a $348 million valuation is something worth examining carefully, because it illuminates something profound about the nature of value itself and about the specific characteristics of the rare coin market that allow such numbers to exist in rational economic conversation. The rare coin market, and particularly the market for significant American era coins, operates according to principles that differ fundamentally from most other asset classes. Supply is not just limited, it is fixed. No new 1991D quadruple die obverse quarters with rotated reverses are going to be produced, ever, under any circumstances. The number of genuine, authenticated specimens in existence is essentially the number that will always exist, barring the miraculous discovery of a previously unknown hoard, which itself would be a numismatic event of world historical proportions. Demand, on the other hand, is not fixed. It grows. The population of high net worth collectors worldwide expands every year. The cultural prestige associated with holding the most extraordinary examples of a nation's coinage history deepens with every passing decade as those coins become more historical, more remote from their origins, more embedded in the legendary narratives that the collecting community constructs around them. When fixed supply meets growing demand in a market where the highest bidder takes the prize and the next auction might not offer another chance for a decade, $348 million stops being an abstraction and starts being a logical outcome. There is also an emotional dimension to the value of the 1991D quarter that no purely financial analysis can fully capture, and we want to spend a moment here because it is real and it is important and it is part of why coins, more than almost any other collectible category, carry the kind of value they do. When you hold a significant 1991D era quarter in your hand, you are holding an object that is simultaneously intimate and vast. It is intimate because it is a coin, an object designed to pass through human hands, to facilitate human transactions, to be a physical token of trust and exchange between people. And it is vast because it is a record of a specific moment in human industrial history, a document of the particular conditions that existed in a particular building in Denver, Colorado, on a particular day in 1991, when a set of machines operated by a set of human beings produced something that no one intended to produce and that the world has been marveling at ever since. Every scratch on its surface, every mark, every characteristic is a record of every hand it passed through before it was recognized for what it was. And that record cannot be recreated, cannot be replicated, and cannot be separated from the coin itself. It is the coin. And owning it means owning that entire chain of human history in a form that fits in the palm of your hand. We want to leave you today with something that goes beyond the numbers, beyond the auction records, beyond the technical specifications of die shifts and planchet errors and mint mark anomalies. Because this channel has always been about more than data. It has always been about the relationship between ordinary people and extraordinary possibility, about the way that history has a habit of hiding its most remarkable secrets in the most ordinary places, about the democratizing truth that the next great numismatic discovery is not locked in a museum vault or owned by a billionaire collector but is quite possibly sitting in your home right now, waiting with the infinite patience of metal and history for the one person who will finally look closely enough to see it. The 1968 quarter, the 1970 D quarter, the 1997 D quarter, the 1991 D quarter. Each of them was, at some point in its life, an ordinary coin in ordinary circulation, handled without ceremony by ordinary people going about their ordinary days. Each of them became extraordinary not because anything changed about the coin itself, but because knowledge met opportunity in the form of a person who knew what to look for and had the wisdom to look. That person could be you. That discovery could be yours. That story, the one you'll tell for the rest of your life about the Tuesday afternoon you looked into a coin jar and pulled out a piece of American history worth more than most people will earn in 1,000 lifetimes, that story has not been written yet. And we believe, with everything this channel stands for, that it belongs to someone who is watching this video right now. Go check your coins. Go look through your collections. Go call your relatives and ask about the old coin folders in the attic. And when you find something that makes you pause, something that catches the light differently, something that seems somehow busier or more complex or more layered than it has any right to be, trust that pause. Because somewhere out there, a 1991 D quarter worth $348 million is still waiting to be found by the right pair of eyes. And those eyes might just be yours.